Picture this. You are standing barefoot on cracked desert sand. The air is 50 degrees Celsius, and it does not just feel hot, it feels hostile. Every inhale burns the back of your throat. The ground beneath you radiates heat like a stovetop left on for hours. There is no shade for miles, no water in sight, and the horizon shimmers like it is melting. Now picture walking through a narrow doorway carved into a tower of sun-baked clay, and within seconds, the temperature around you drops to a crisp 18 degrees Celsius. No hum of a compressor. No spinning fan blades. No wires running through the walls. Just cold. And somewhere inside that same building, sitting in a shadowed underground room, is a block of solid ice, formed in a desert that has not seen a snowflake in recorded history. This is not science fiction. This actually happened more than 2,500 years ago, and the people who pulled it off never used a single watt of electricity to do it. So how does a civilization freeze water in one of the hottest climates on Earth, using nothing but mud, wind, and starlight? Let's take this apart, piece by piece. To understand why the Persians needed to solve this problem at all, you have to understand the world they were building in. Around 500 BC, the Achaemenid Persian Empire was stretching across what is now Iran, and much of that land was brutal, sun-scorched plateau. Cities like Yazd were rising directly out of arid basins where rainfall was almost non-existent for most of the year. If you were an ordinary person living there, heat was not a seasonal inconvenience. It was a daily threat to your survival. Meat spoiled within hours. Fruit turned to mush before it could be eaten. Water left in open clay jars evaporated faster than anyone could drink it. And royalty, merchants, and generals all faced the same brutal math. Without a way to cool food, water, and living spaces, entire cities in this empire would have simply been unlivable for a third of the year. The Persians had two choices: abandon the richest trade routes and mineral deposits in the region, or outsmart the desert itself using pure physics. They chose the second option, and what they built still leaves modern engineers stunned. The first weapon against the heat was a tower. Not a tower for defense, but a tower built purely to hunt for cold air. These structures were called Badgirs, which roughly translates to wind catchers, and they rose directly above the rooftops of homes and palaces. From the ground, they looked like simple chimneys made of thick clay brick. But their real function had nothing to do with how they looked, and everything to do with a basic law of airflow that most people never think about. Down at street level, desert air is slow, thick with dust, and unbearably hot. But just a few meters higher, air moves faster and carries less of that trapped ground heat. The tall, narrow openings at the top of a Badgir were angled specifically to grab this higher, faster-moving air and funnel it straight down into the building below. As that faster air rushed downward through the narrow shaft, something interesting happened. It created a pressure imbalance inside the structure. The hot, stagnant air already sitting inside the home had nowhere to go except out, forced through openings on the opposite wall. This produced a constant, self-powered current of air movement, running day and night, with zero moving parts and zero fuel. But cool moving air, on its own, could only do so much. To actually chill a room down to refrigerator-like temperatures, the Persians needed something with far more cooling potential than wind alone. They needed water. Ice-cold water, flowing from somewhere the desert sun could never reach. That is where one of the most underrated engineering achievements in human history comes in: the Qanat. These were long, gently sloping tunnels, dug entirely by hand, sometimes stretching for dozens of kilometers underground, carrying snowmelt from distant mountains straight into the heart of desert cities. Workers dug vertical access shafts every so often along the route, both for air circulation during construction and for future maintenance, dropping tens of meters into the earth in complete darkness, using nothing but hand tools and oil lamps. The slope of a Qanat had to be almost perfectly calculated. Too steep, and the racing water would erode the tunnel walls and collapse the entire system. Too shallow, and the water would stagnate and stop flowing altogether. This was civil engineering with zero margin for error, executed without a single modern surveying tool. Once that freezing mountain water reached the city, Persian builders connected it directly beneath the base of their wind catcher towers. Here is where the real trick happened. As the hot, dry air pulled down by the Badgir made contact with the surface of that cold, flowing water, it triggered rapid evaporative cooling. The same basic principle your body uses when sweat evaporates off your skin and instantly cools you down. The air lost a dramatic amount of heat almost instantly. and this newly chilled air was then pushed upward into the living spaces by simple pressure and gravity. While the street outside baked at 50 degrees Celsius, the room inside could sit near 18. No compressor, no refrigerant gas. Just wind, buried water, and a very clever understanding of how air behaves. Cooling a room is impressive, but somewhere along the way, the Persians decided cooling a room was not enough. They wanted actual ice, in the middle of summer, in a place that never dropped below freezing during the day. And to pull that off, they needed to master a completely different kind of physics, one that has nothing to do with wind or water flow, and everything to do with the night sky itself. Desert nights, especially in high, dry regions, tend to have almost no cloud cover. And clouds, it turns out, act like a blanket, trapping heat close to the ground. Without that blanket, heat from the Earth's surface escapes directly upward into the atmosphere and beyond, in a process scientists call radiative cooling. Even after a 50-degree day, a clear desert night can allow surface temperatures to plunge dramatically, sometimes even below freezing, purely because there is nothing overhead to stop that heat from radiating away into space. The Persians built massive dome structures called Yakhchals specifically to take advantage of this nightly phenomenon. Some of these domes rose over 18 meters into the air, built with thick, double-layered walls that trapped a pocket of insulating air between them, similar in concept to a modern thermos. Each evening, workers would channel shallow pools of water into wide, open basins positioned right beside these domes, fully exposed to the night sky. As the heat radiated away, that water would freeze into thin sheets of ice before the sun ever rose again. Just before dawn, workers rushed to break up and collect that ice, hauling it into the shaded underground chambers of the Yakhchal, where it was packed tightly with layers of straw and reeds acting as natural insulation. Combined with the constant cooling draft pulled in by connected wind catchers, these underground vaults stayed below freezing for the entire year, even through the hottest months of summer. Think about the sheer audacity of that idea. In a landscape where the ground burns your feet by noon, Persian engineers figured out how to manufacture and store solid ice using nothing but nighttime air, clever architecture, and patience. By the time these systems matured, Yakhchals were not just cooling luxury items for royalty. They were used to preserve meat and produce for months at a time, to make frozen fruit desserts for celebrations, and to store medicine that would otherwise spoil in the heat. Historical accounts even describe armies and travelers marveling at the discovery of stored ice deep in Persian territory, assuming it must have been transported from distant mountains, never suspecting it had been grown, harvested, and frozen locally, entirely without fire or fuel. Here is what makes this story matter today, and not just as a historical curiosity. Modern air conditioning, on average, accounts for a massive share of electricity demand across hot climates in the United States every single summer, and that demand keeps climbing as global temperatures rise. Entire power grids strain and sometimes fail during extreme heat waves, precisely because our cooling systems depend entirely on a constant, uninterrupted supply of electricity. Meanwhile, architects and engineers working on sustainable building design have started returning to exactly the kind of passive cooling the Persians perfected thousands of years ago. Modern buildings in the Middle East, and even experimental green developments in places like Australia and parts of the American Southwest, are now incorporating updated versions of wind catcher towers, built from steel and glass instead of clay, but running on the exact same principle of pulling cooler air downward, using nothing but airflow physics. It is a strange thought, but true. Some of the smartest solutions to our modern energy crisis may not come from a lab or a tech company at all. They may already be sitting in the ruins of a 2,500-year-old desert city, waiting for someone to look at them properly. So here is a question worth sitting with. If ancient engineers could cool an entire building and even freeze solid ice in a 50-degree desert with absolutely no power source at all, what does that say about how much unnecessary energy we are burning through today? If this kind of ancient engineering fascinates you as much as it fascinates me, hit that like button and subscribe to Curious Epoch, because we are going to keep digging into the incredible, forgotten technology of the ancient world. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.